Hello, and welcome to our expert panel discussion on developmental domains and assessment. We kindly request your attention for a brief moment in the spirit of transparency and utmost respect for our community. We have some information we'd like you to read on this disclaimer screen. By taking a few moments to read through this disclaimer, you empower yourself with very important information regarding the boundaries of our knowledge sharing environment. Please take a moment to read through this slide also. Then together we'll embark upon some exciting topics in early childhood education. This panel of experts was created to provide real-world examples of two very important topics in early childhood education. The first topic will cover the 4 developmental domains and how each domain advances the others. The second topic will discuss early childhood assessment and how it helps us better understand development. So let's get started by introducing ourselves and telling us how long you've been in education and then how long you've been at UAGC. Amy, would you like to go first?
Sure. I've been in education for about 25 years and at UAGC for 12 years. Rhonda?
I've been in education for 10 years and I have been at UAGC for less than a year since October.
Steph, do you want to go?
I have been in education for 25 years also, and I have been at UAGC almost 15 years.
Great. Kayla.
I've been in education for about 12 years, and I've been at UAGC for 1 year next month.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got a great panel here. Our very first question is, what is your favorite developmental domain, and how does that domain advance the other domains? So Amy, would you like to go first?
Yes, this was fun because I'm not on the panel, I'm a moderator, but I said, can I just talk about cognitive development really fast because I love it so much. And when I was thinking about what to say, I just thought of some examples that are really interesting. So like, for instance, a baby is born and develops too many synapses in the brain. And so there's so much going on in the brain that it's as if you were trying to make a phone call, but there were way too many phone lines and you just called all the phone lines. And that's why babies can't control their movements. And so the brain starts pruning those synapses, and that's how they get their physical development of the more calculated movements. Also, the brain figures out what sounds the child does not need. So that's language development because it's pruning to choose which language sounds to come up with. And then another thing that I just think is amazing, it's called theory of mind. So the child, before they have theory of mind, they just think everyone thinks the exact same way that they think. So like if you say, look at this, it's a box of crayons, it looks like, and you go, what do you think's in this? And they're like, crayons. But you open it up and it's birthday candles. They're like, oh my gosh, it's birthday candles. Okay. And so you close it and you say, okay, I'm going to call Steph in here. What is she going to think's in here? They're like, birthday candles. Because all they know is what they know. And obviously that's what Steph thinks too. And so once they pass that stage and have theory of mind, it really helps with the social emotional development, because now I know that Steph has different feelings than me and she has different thoughts than me. And then the last example I had was where I wrote it on my screen. Where'd it go? It's moral development. So moral development also goes through stages. So if you have 2 different stages of children playing, say, Foursquare, if it's a lower stage moral development, they will think that rules are made by some higher authority and the Foursquare gods have made these rules. They are not flexible. They are rules. But just one little moral development stage later, they know that if the group agrees there's no chicken feet, then there's no chicken feet. So they understand that you can bend those rules as long as the group agrees. So if you have two different stages of moral development playing together, it's going to clash. And so that also it advances the social emotional domain once you have different moral stages. And so I just love, you could talk to me all day about cognitive development, but I will let someone else talk. So Steph, do you want to go?
Gosh, I will. It's hard to follow that one though, Dr. Johnson. So one that just speaks to my heart is physical development. So as we know, our littlest learners are growing in so many ways. Their bodies are starting to develop. They are growing both physically and also in the maturation of a child's body. So one thing we really hone in on in the early childhood years are both motor skills, fine motor and gross motor. So your gross motor skills, those large movement skills, are the ones that use large muscles. Conversely, fine motor skills are those that use small muscles, right? So these physical changes that we're seeing in our littles are height, weight, coordination, balance, sensory abilities, all those things, even vision and hearing are in the physical domain. So when we think of like the true picture of our littles, we want to make sure that we're factoring in this physical domain. It absolutely impacts other domains in that we know our learners are engaged in crawling, walking, running, jumping. They're learning all those things. They're starting to manipulate objects with increased dexterity. So this physical movement is actually adding to their cognition or their cognitive development. Physical activity, we know, stimulates cognitive development. It enhances the brain connections and it promotes neural connections in our little's brain. So as they engage in activities like block building or putting together puzzles, not only are they using those small muscles, those fine motor skills, but they're also developing problem solving. They're also developing spatial awareness. They're developing logical thinking. So we see that element of cognitive development aligned with physical. We also see social emotional, right? Physical activities are often interactions with peers. Those social skills are there, such as cooperation, sharing, turn taking, regulating emotions. Have you ever had a block taken from you as a 3-year-old? You have to regulate your emotions. So we also want to look at the promotion of overall well-being in these physical activities. Language is another domain that's enhanced. Physical activities allow for language-rich interactions, right? You see it, sandbox going on, what's going on, dialogue's going on, right? The back and forth, playing games, we have physical challenges. We're utilizing both our expressive vocabulary, what we say, and our receptive vocabulary, what we can understand. How fun are obstacle courses where we get them to go under? That's a big word for an early childhood a child. What over the blocks, around the blocks, through, all those are big words. So we are promoting and fostering good, rich language skills. And the last one I'll say is creative development, which may not be a domain, but I want to just pause here for a moment because think about how physical activity encourages imagination. It encourages creativity. In our classrooms, we want play, right? We want that fun classroom. So whether it's dancing, engaging those full-on gross motor skills or using their bodies to express creatively, don't forget to integrate in that creative development because it does foster children's learning and growth. So that's mine. I'm going to popcorn it over to Rhonda.
Well, mine is social emotional domain. And this is absolutely my favorite to speak to, especially when I think of my children. I have 3 kids and a 4th one on the way. And also through my years in education and just being a mom, I see how important this particular domain is for child development. And I think about just from the moment a baby can visually see you, that social interaction begins, the bonding experience, honestly, smell you too. That bonding with adults around them is important for regulation of a lot of different things going on in their bodies. Building relationships is important, also an essential to consider when it comes to social emotional interaction with families and friends and teachers and peers. Kids are learning about how relationships provide them with support, satisfies a need, gives them a sense of belonging, and that's all crucial for healthy development. Like Steph mentioned, or Dr. Stephanie, emotional regulation, super important for our youngest learners, and also quite difficult for our youngest learners. And sometimes people don't understand, why is that so difficult for them? I'm an adult and I can just transition and pivot in my day. I understand that sometimes I don't have money for McDonald's and I just can't afford McDonald's right now. But for a kid, that's a huge deal for you to say, no, we can't have McDonald's. And so for them to be able to emotionally regulate and accept rejection, accept no, it can be quite difficult for young ones. If you say, no, it's not time for us to read books right now, library time is over. What? It's the end of the world? I can't read my book right now. And so helping little ones understand how to accept no, accept rejection, what they might seem as rejection, accept not having access to preferred items, access to preferred people, will help them cope with stress and frustration and disappointment in more healthy ways. You know, it helps also to reduce the risk of behavioral issues and even like further mental health problems later on in life. So promoting emotional regulation as like teaching, guiding is also important in our early childhood education classrooms. And then also communication skills. We can only imagine what it's like for a child who cannot communicate and how emotionally frustrating that could be. So the less communication skills someone has, a lot of times the less emotional regulation they sometimes display. So that's also something to consider when you're thinking about developmental delay. So as a student or a child develops their communication skills, that can actually help them to be, or their language skills, that can help them to be a little bit more socially regulated, because this helps them to advocate for themselves, helps them to resolve conflicts peacefully, to collaborate with people, to set boundaries for themselves, to demonstrate their needs and wants, their thoughts, their feelings. So it's important to think about that. And also empathy, right? So, for some people, empathy is not something that comes naturally. And sometimes they need to be explicitly taught what empathy and compassion is. Social emotional regulation, not regulation, but development allows a child to understand what someone else is feeling. And I think this also speaks to the cognitive development as well. Sometimes adults don't understand that sometimes children really are narcissistic. The world revolves around them and their wants and their needs. They can't think about other people right now. And eventually, one day, they actually do think about you and what you need. And that's amazing. But until a certain point when they're younger, it's about me. I want, I need. I don't care about your job and what you're doing or whatever. I just know that I need this. And so eventually they develop empathy and compassion, and then problem solving skills to be able to interact differently with different people, make responsible decisions, to think independently. These are all a part of engaging with people and learn about different social situations, different expectations in different social environment. You'll be surprised how young a child can learn that in church I can behave this way, at home I can behave this way, and in school I can behave this way. Even sometimes 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, they eventually understand that there are different social expectations and different ways that I am expected to behave and interact with adults and children in these different environments. And then also, I would say confidence, self-esteem, all of to be able to bounce back from setbacks and think about goals. It all starts from when they're that little. and developing how they see other people interact with each other, how they interact with you, how they develop a sense of life and belief about their ability to overcome obstacles. It really does start from that young. Yes, I can learn my ABCs. I'm confident in this. And I think it honestly, social emotional domain affects almost all the other ones. I would say there's like a symbiotic relationship between all of the domains. But when I think about impulsivity, self-regulation, problem solving, these all speaks to the cognitive development. And so having a lot of different social and emotional stimulation and skill building can also help with that impulse control and help with better ways to solve problems, which promotes cognitive development. Also, the social emotional interaction really lays a foundation for language development. And I know I spoke earlier that language development also, it's the other way around too, affects social emotional interactions. But when kids engage in conversations, they experience two-way dialogue, they're able to listen to others, they're able to express thoughts and feelings. They start to practice some of those important language skills like turn taking, and they get to understand language expectations in social interactions. Also, physical development. I also believe that social emotional skills contribute in a way to healthy behaviors like self-care routines. They understand how to help themselves manage stress, how to promote or take care of, support their overall health and make healthy life choices. And of course, the emotional, I think, affects the social development when I think about them a little bit separately, because it helps you to form relationships and collaborate with people and navigate different social situations. You're better equipped to have relationships with both peers and adult, to have encouragement, opportunities for social learning and growth when you have that emotional regulation. I know that was a lot.
Good job, Kayla.
Yes. So I was going to speak about the language domain, and I love language. I love languages. I love all the aspects of communication. I think that there's just something really special about humans communicating with each other and all of the different forms that that can take. I worked a lot in early intervention, and so I've worked with a lot of autistic children. I've worked with a lot of children with physical disabilities and speech impairments. I've worked with deaf children and their families. And so I've seen language in a lot of different ways. And I think that a lot of times people hear the word language and they think speaking and not much else. And so like I just really wanted to just press the idea of having an inclusive lens when you think about language and what that looks like as far as the different forms that it comes in. And so, you know, it typically it starts in sorry, I just lost my train of thought. It starts in sounds and gestures, you know, with infants. It moves to words or sign language or nonverbal communication, and all these different forms that it can come in. But that is kind of the traditional route that it takes. It starts in those sounds and gestures and moves to more of a true communication form. And as that happens, I think really the language domain is special because it touches each domain. I mean, they all touch each other, sure, but language really touches each domain. It really, because of those different forms that it can take, it really affects each domain in a powerful way. When I think of like the cognitive domain specifically, I think in my mind, that's the closest direct association, because you have solving problems, you have thinking, you have learning, you have academics. These are all like the core is rooted in language acquisition, and that development, the development path that takes with that child and how the language forms. You have that cognitive processing across all different environments, home, school, eventually work. So much cognitive processing that happens, and it's just rooted in that language. You have this social emotional domain where, you know, you have relationship building, you have empathy, you have social communication and engagement, child to child, adult to child, again, rooted in language. And even with gross and fine motor, gross motor, you have, I think of like team sports and athletic terminology and just all these different things. With fine motor, you have, you know, writing, obviously. You have different forms of written expression. You have art. You have even just gestures is language. Self-help and adaptive domain, again, you have self-advocacy. So you have child to adult, you have children communicating their needs to other children, to the adults in their life. How they express those needs, how that social communication happens is based on their language acquisition. You have spiritual or moral, and even that is, you know, you have religion and spirituality that develops in a child's life, from whether that's family values or their cultural religion, or just their basic sense of right and wrong that's instilled from their family. You have ethics. These are all kind of really based around how the child learns to speak, how the child learns to, now I say speak, but again, that's sign language, nonverbal communication, any of that interaction, that exchange that's happening, communication exchange, that is really going to affect all those other domains, and how that child engages in their environment is really what it comes down to. And so that's why I love the language domain, because to me, it is kind of the jack of all trades. It is all encompassing. So
That was the big bulk of it. Now we've introduced it. So just the shorter part is, how does assessment help us understand this development? Steph, what do you have to say?
Yeah, so when we think about assessment with physical development, we really want to know that it gives us valuable insight into a child's overall just health, well-being, and motor skill proficiency. That's important because you guys know how fast they do develop. So we want to make sure we're looking at those developmental milestones, and we're really identifying where children fall in relation to those. Where are their movement patterns, their balance, coordination? All motor development really is something we want to take a look at. Typical development and possibly atypical development, right? We want to look for those signs that might not be developing typically. We also want to make sure we're monitoring growth. And that's important because, again, these regular assessments, including height, weight, body mass index, we really want to think about nutrition and obesity in relation to this. We want to look at growth over time. And the reason is, again, just tracking these growth patterns are huge in identifying potential health issues, nutritional deficiencies that they might have that might impact overall physical development, right? These are key years. We also want to look at motor skill proficiency. And the reason is, we want to ensure, again, that their motor skills, running, jumping, throwing, drawing, all of those allow for typical development, right? On the flip side, if our assessments are not showing typical development, or we're seeing some red flags, this is huge in early intervention. Early intervention allows us to detect potential delays or disorders so that we are able to provide children with the support that they need, right? Early detection, early intervention can help mitigate the impact of these challenges, you know, for a child early on and later in life. So ultimately, these assessments inform the support we can give to our children. And that is so very important in the youngest years.
Well said. Rhonda, did you have any other ideas on assessment?
I think when I think about some assessments, particularly in the classrooms, outside of maybe some of the standard assessments that we use to assess milestones or assessments from the doctor. A lot of times those happen. Sometimes teachers can make observations observe the way children behave and interact in different settings, even collaboratively with parents to collaborate on the different environments and have those observations in different environments to look for signs of social skill, emotional regulation, empathy, cooperation, problem solving, self-soothing, to also some other domains, honestly, that may even impact, like I was saying before, social emotional. When I think of, for example, communication, you may want to assess communication, how does this student display or this child display autonomy at the appropriate milestone? As Dr. Heald was mentioning about milestones, it's important to think about what level of autonomy a child should be able to display at a certain age level. Can a child put their shoes on by themselves? Can a child feed themselves? And then also think about their affect, right? What they're physically displaying on their face. Can they mimic emotion? Do they laugh, giggle when you play along with them? And these type of screenings can help identify the type of resources that could be provided for your student. If we're thinking about communication, maybe we need a pictorial exchange if they're delayed in communication skills. And this can help to curb some of the tantruming behavior. Maybe tantruming is actually because they cannot communicate well. And now that they've learned pictorial exchange system, and even if their language, their actual expressive language has not developed, this might help actually to center them. So now they can communicate their wants and needs that satisfy something for them. So sometimes the observations are key. I've noted it. Now this might push me to get an assessment by a neuropsychologist or to your local school district. A lot of times and a lot of states offer free assessments. Now I've seen these observations, I can go and push for those and get some resources.
Yes. Kayla?
Yes, I had a couple of analogies that I wanted to share. An assessment, I see an assessment where like the child is a book, okay? And so an assessment opens this book. And so you can read the story. And without an assessment, you're really only reading the jacket. And you're judging this book, this child, by its cover. And so you get the summary, but you don't know the details of the story. And the other analogy that came to me was it's like a puzzle. You have all the pieces to a puzzle, but without that lid that has that picture on it that you can see as a model, it's you get that full image. You're just kind of grasping at straws until all the pieces fit together, and you're like, oh well, this kind of looks like this. Let's see if they go together. But an assessment is like that lid that guides you and gives you that big picture. You have all the domains together, and that assessment is what puts it together for you, the big image for you. And that's why I like multi-domain assessments, like DAISY. These assessments, they look at multiple developmental domains, not just one. So you can fit all the pieces together and you can get that big picture. Because like with language specifically, assessing language processing, it's really important because, as I said before, language really is all encompassing. And so a delay in language can greatly affect another domain. And so if you see this child who is showing a delay in something else, like social emotional or self-help, and you're like, oh, well, this child is showing signs of this, fill in the blank. But realistically, what this assessment can show you is, oh no, they have a language delay, or there's something happening here in the language domain. And so you can take that and you can look at your previous guess, like the puzzle, and really adjust that and say, oh well, no, this is really a language issue. And that's what the assessment shows you is it opens up these different viewpoints and perspectives for you to not just jump to, one issue when it really is a language issue. And so that's really the importance of the assessments.
I love your analogies. That was wonderful. Thank you. Well, I want to thank all of you for being here and sharing your expertise with us. And we hope to see you again sometime.